Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the Almost Essential Podcast. My co-host joining me here is Ep.3 Zelda. How you doing today?
What's up, my dude?
You
I'm
ready to
doing
talk about some
pretty
nerd
good.
shit?
Oh yeah, dude, we got good topics today. Got good topics today.
Let's start with we'll get into Apple and fighting off everybody at them later on,
Oh
but they're
yeah,
involved in a lot of lawsuits right now. But let's start off with the Goku versus
the Google
Google
Roku.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Talk to me about that a little bit while I set up the rest of stuff on this
yeah.
end.
Okay, so my understanding of the situation with Google Roku is actually fucking hilarious. So for those of you who don't know, I guess there's only three of us here, but for those of you who don't know, Roku is like it's like a set-top box, kind of like an Apple TV or a Chromecast or an Amazon Fire Stick that basically comes preloaded with a bunch of apps, and you can watch TV, watch Netflix, you can watch YouTube, whatever. So one of the services on there is YouTube's YouTube TV service, and the YouTube TV service is like, I think it's like a bunch of shows and stuff. Kind of, I think it's like a kind of like a subscription Netflix model thing. And each of these services, like Netflix and whatever, they pay like a fee to be on there as default. I'm pretty sure what happened is that Google's YouTube TV contract was up, and Roku was like, they weren't really coming to a settling, and so Roku thought they were pulling like the Chad Alpha Gamer move, and they're like, all right, fine, and they just removed YouTube TV from Roku. They're like, we can't come to an agreement. Like, we'll put you back when we agree, like on some terms. And YouTube was like, bitch, we know that you can't survive without us.
We're the
So what they
juggernaut,
do?
bitch!
They rolled YouTube TV into the YouTube app. So they were like, if you want to get rid of YouTube TV, you gotta get rid of YouTube, bitch. And they're like, oh shit. They didn't see it coming. They're like, oh, how is this possible? They're being felled. I don't think they removed the YouTube app. Like, I think that they're just kind of screwed. Like, YouTube, you could just watch YouTube TV through YouTube on Roku, and they had absolutely no way. They had no way around that. Like, there's nothing to do. Yeah, but it's kind of an escalation, and they know that Roku relies on them because they don't actually have. I think they might have their own proprietary apps, but most people use like YouTube and Netflix, and the big players, not maybe the Amazon, the Crave. But they're not willing to lose YouTube, so they just sort of moved on over. Yeah, which is very interesting, I think.
It's going to be interesting to see how Google and these big companies fight back and forth, because we've seen some of this with like other tech giants fighting back and forth in the past where, I don't like your service, I don't like your product. We're actually competitors. We're going to highlight this by making your tech not work with our tech at all. And now
Yeah,
nobody can actually access stuff that they just want to access, which is interesting
yeah,
and leads to weird scenarios where like shit that should just work suddenly doesn't. And
yeah,
let's
yeah.
see.
It's so interesting how every one of them ends up pushing towards like monopolistic tendencies as soon as there's
Yep.
competition. They're like,
Which
oh,
is what
actually,
the whole
no.
internet started fighting against to start with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
Anything
very
else?
interesting.
Anything else on that before we dive into the Apple versus?
I don't think so. I don't think there's anything more. Let me quickly check this.
Because it's one of those things we're just going to have to
article.
wait and see how it flushes out, right? Like
Yeah, so
like a news.
basically, what Google's trying to do here, from the look of this article, is that they're trying to go to lawsuit. Like, they're trying to get Roku to actually fight them in court. Because they could, argue monopolistic tendencies, I think, on the part of Roku, that, like, they control the marketplace and whatever, and they also have their own app on the marketplace, which brings us, like, I guess, sort of nestles quite nicely into the conversation that you have now about Apple, because Apple is under like a plethora of.
There's a bombardment going on.
Dude, there's
let's
three,
start with listing all three of them, and then let's pick which one we want to go into first. Of which,
okay,
which
so you got
makes the most sense to start with. So they got Apple versus Epic is everyone knows the big one, right?
Yeah, Apple versus Epic, Apple versus Tile, and Apple versus Spotify as
So most
well.
people have heard of Epic and Spotify. So let's say what Tile is for
Well,
those who don't
everyone's
know.
gonna know about the Tile because of the AirTag shit.
They should.
So
Sometimes they don't.
any one of them are good. So let's do Apple versus Epic first. Like,
Okay, let's do that one.
yeah,
So Fortnite, you ready for the
Yeah.
memes?
yeah, hit me.
So most people are aware of how much underhanded manipulation that some people do with the App Store and trying to be like, yo, Apple makes a killing on how much they actually charge the developers. And this has been like a war this wage back and forth of how much cut does the App Store get from your profits?
Right.
And it's been back and forth. One thing that's kind of interesting to note on this was that in 2019, Apple's profit margin for their store was something like 80% or
78%, right?
78%, right?
Yeah.
So
it's worth noting that the
they
cut.
dispute that in court, by the way. They're like, yo, we don't want to actually
Yeah.
talk about that. We'll like throw
Yeah,
that
yeah,
under
yeah.
the bus. But that's from like pretty reliable sources.
Right.
Apple does not want to get their they don't want to like lose so much of their revenue. They want as much of that going directly into their coffers as possible. So they're going to be like, yo, no, we're just going to roll that into the game. So anything you buy inside of Fortnite, your skins, your dances, your
Yeah.
Wahulus, whatever the fuck, we'll just sell that to you in game.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to go through the Apple Store. And so then we spawn.
You
this
know what the
big
cut
lawsuit.
was, right? Like, just to make sure so that the audience that eventually hears this, if they aren't aware, you know what the cut is?
Hit me.
It's 30%.
Hmm.
So you're literally not allowed to. So the rules are you can't sell anything not through the App Store itself. So Apple gets a cut of any transaction in your app, 30%. And you're not allowed to make any mention anywhere in your app that there's somewhere else to actually buy whatever you're selling.
Or it's grounds for automatic delisting
Automatic
of your
termination.
app, and like it's
Yeah.
just gone, and
Yeah,
which they've
and-
done before.
Well, I mean that was what happened with Epic. Epic was like
I'm saying before Epic, they've done
before
it too.
Epic, yeah,
Yeah.
it has. Yeah, so that's kind of like that's where we get into that Apple v Epic thing, where Epic sort of knew that they were going to get removed. They have a massive app. I think they made something like $9 billion in 1 year or some shit like that from Fortnite, and Apple, of course, gets like 30% of whatever they earn. And they were like, all right, even though we're this massive earner, like we're going to sell stuff in game anyway, not through the App Store, except in game payments, and we're gonna goad Apple into a lawsuit, essentially, which is where they're at now, right?
Yeah. So, this has been kind of like a fun boxing match to watch them try to fight. This is not a jury trial. This is a bench trial before a judge, or it's before a judge in the case. I forget the.
It's
correct
not
one.
a jury trial, that's for sure. I do know that.
So in front of the judge, it's been kind of interesting to watch some of the footage go back and forth about a bunch of these people who are kind of unaware of what actually is going on, but like are trying to argue the legal standings of everything and trying to hear them define what actually a game exists as, or like an in-game item. Like it's hilarious, like watching a comedy of errors. Like you hear the music like it's been interesting to watch. I don't know how far we'll get with actually making progress, but to note, there has been some changes that have come about as a result of everything so far, like specifically policies regarding if your app does not make a certain amount, less than $1 million, depending on like whatever it is, income, then we don't charge you. But then as soon as you start making more than $1 million or whatever, then the Apple 30% tax comes into play.
What's important to note too is that, and one of the things that actually kicked this off was that there are companies with exceptions, big enough because it's like a fucking bell curve. Like if you make too little, they don't charge you as much, and if you make too much,
Then you get to
they'll
be
also
special.
charge you less too, because they're like, okay, so it's like ordering in bulk kind of deal. You know, clearly we don't need you to contribute as much to the stuff that we're doing behind the scenes because you're already contributing a shit ton. So some companies, I can't remember which ones, uh, Apple cut exemption. I gotta see. I want to try and see who actually made it. Yeah, they like there are some companies with 15% cuts and 25% cuts and 20% cuts
Hmm.
as well. Like they just had a particular problem with Apple's with Epic specifically. Like they just didn't want to lower it. That's it. Like they just refused to.
The way this all started and then going back and forth, very aggressively was like Epic was almost like, "Yo, sue me, I dare you!" Like they
Yeah,
jumped
yeah,
into this very
yeah.
very aggressively. Um,
Well, they were already ready with
they
their attack ads and shit, right?
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
like for the people who don't know some of the backstory, like within the there was a decision made, and as soon as Apple decided to actually ban the uh, Epic apps from their store, the lawsuit was filed within like 24, 48 hours or something like that. Like they had all the documentation ready to go. Like they were
Right.
ready for war. And then it's been kind of interesting to watch some players be like, we actually don't like Apple's 30% cut of what goes on their marketplace,
Yeah.
and them finding themselves like weird allies of like, Epic is not who I thought I would be fighting this war against Apple with. Like,
Yeah.
that whole thing's been interesting.
I don't think there's any developer who's come out and said that it's fair.
Mm-hmm.
I think every single developer is on Epic's side on this one, whether they're fans of Epic or not. I like no, I haven't heard a single tech person or of a single company who is of the mind that the Apple tax is fair. And I mean, just looking at the profit margin, that makes perfect sense. Like you're walking in with an 80% profit margin from this shit, right? Like it means you're making way more than you're actually providing as a service to the people who consume these apps and also create these apps.
So I'm gonna throw us on a side tangent that's gonna wrap back around for a second.
Yeah.
It came out this past week that like officially public news, as in like it's verified to some degree, that Microsoft does not actually make a profit on their consoles. Like they're operating at a loss on their consoles all the time for their
Right.
Xbox 360s and Xbox lineup.
And they're killing
Which,
it on Xbox Live, right? Or like
right.
whatever Game Pass. Yeah.
So like this is kind of like if you want to have an argument in Apple's corner for like, okay, well, how is this actually working? Of like justifying it some way. You could say that they're trying to make their phones cheaper, and in order to make their phones cheaper, they need to recoup that cost somewhere. So in order to do it, to get Apple products in the hands of more people, that they're losing money on hardware but making it back up through the App Store. That's been like the only like legitimate argument that I'm like, okay, maybe I'll entertain that idea.
Yeah, except their phones aren't cheap. And they're selling their phones at a massive profit too.
I know. So on paper, it makes sense. But this was like 2019. They had 80% or 78% profit margin. So it's like,
yeah,
that was a little while ago. So should we have had the cheaper phones by now? It like only holds up on paper, kind of thing.
Yeah, and every cheaper phone that they've produced, despite the fact that I appreciate their effort to have like cheaper phones come out, they're just reskinned older phones. Like the iPhone SE is iPhone 8. You know, it's an iPhone 8 with a new processor in it. So like it's literally an old phone, like with massive chin, massive top, and like massive notch or whatever. Not even a notch. It's just it's got just a massive bezel, and it's like. So how are you like I know that you're not, but like how could you argue that they're cutting corner, like they're already cutting the cost somewhere. They've been making this insane cut since the App Store launched, and their phones have been getting progressively more expensive. So they're just walking away with the money, I think. And they just don't want to give it up. right? Because if it's a net, like if it's 80% profit margin, that's talking about like including what they spend on the app store. So like they're not recouping their costs like anywhere else. And I mean, just look at the fucking AirPod sales, okay? Like AirPods alone, like if you branch it off of Apple, literally is bigger than like most Fortune 500 companies. Like
Yeah.
that's how much they make on those products alone, and they're I mean they're just plastic, you know. If even if R&D was a lot of money, it's not even close to the amount like that they cost to produce these things. So yeah, I don't buy that. I could never buy that, and they're gonna end up lowering their fucking cut.
They're going to
I'm
have
almost
to.
positive. They're gonna have to because other stores are clearly operating at a lower margin and things are just fine. Like, you know, and going back to the Xcode like security risk, like that profit margin isn't protecting everyone necessarily from some sort of bad actor putting an app on the App Store. It still happens.
Even though most of the affected users are in China, still 18 million Americans are affected by this vulnerability that just got right through their. So they have their division that like works on approving apps and filtering all that stuff is
Yeah.
like 500 people, and then if you do the math and factor in like how many apps that they return and deny back and forth, it looks like they deny 40% of them, 1% are actually repealed, and then like usually the developer
Yeah.
just goes away, tucks their tail, fixes the problem, and then comes back and reapplies. So but very few are actually just like straight up faced. But that works out with the 500 person crew that's actually working on that. That turns out to be like 400 apps a day. So like an algorithm is taking care of some of that, and they need lunch breaks, and they're not working 24-hour days. So they're working like if you factor all that in, okay, well that's still a lot to go through, but they're clearly able to manage it to some degree. So it can't be all to pay that, like that entire overhead
Yeah.
can't be
I mean,
explained away.
it can't be because that wouldn't be part of the profit margin,
Right.
right? Like that would be part of operating costs.
It should
So
be.
right. I mean,
I don't know how they do
if
the
their
math,
profit
but
margin
like,
was zero and they were accomplishing what they were accomplishing, then everything would be fine. Like they wouldn't be operating at a loss. It'd still be like neutral, but they're operating at an 80% profit margin,
mhm.
which means that everything that they do to preserve the App Store is not included in that, which is yeah.
So
Yeah.
where does that leave us?
Well, I mean that's pretty much it with the Apple Epic shit. I don't know of any other. I know that a lot of people are not very happy with the state of the cut on the App Store, but I don't know of any other public companies that have fought over it. And I don't think that there's any need to right now because Epic is very clearly just going to take the heat and fight for other devs. And it's not very clear if or when that is like another company is going to go after. I think this is going to be one of those cases that sets the precedent. Like,
So for reference for people, the Google Play Store policy as of July 1st is 15%.
yeah. Oh, really? Like I thought it was higher, but you could install other app stores. I thought it was. Is it 15%?
On their first million. So like
Okay, and then after that, it's like 30 as well.
I think so. But
Yeah,
like I think it's saying that, let's see. I think in
but
general, like both are having pressure put on them to reduce this.
yeah, but I mean, Google has an out, right? Because
If you
you
want,
can
you could just install your own app.
yeah you can install the app not through the Play Store. Like you could just go straight from the website and install the APK,
This is actually
or
how
you
the
could
Amazon app started with Google. Like you'd have to actually sideload the Amazon shopping app for a while.
yeah,
It wasn't on
and
the
you could
store.
also install other stores. Like
Mhm.
Google Play Store is not the only store.
Right. There's
And
other app marketplaces.
of course, this is bullshit because everybody's phone comes with the Google Play Store, so it's very clear that they have a very natural advantage to anyone that isn't willing to go out of their way and install the app themselves.
They have
or
a
the
vested
store
interest to
themselves.
make that the native default experience
Yeah,
and make it hard
of
for
course.
people to sideload other marketplaces or apps.
Yeah, but at least Google kind of has their shit prepared there because they're like, well, I mean, we're not stopping you. Like, do whatever you
You
want,
could do
guys.
it if you wanted to. You're at
Yeah.
risk, but like, go ahead.
Whereas Apple gets it straight to the face here because they don't like they have an ironclad grip on what apps can be installed. And I guess this segues perfectly into Spotify versus Apple because part of the fact that they have this monopolistic like market where they control basically everything that happens when it comes to Spotify versus Apple, the reason that they're getting slammed by the EU right now for antitrust, especially because Spotify complained to the EU.
Mhm.
I think it's an American company, right? Complaining to the EU, and the reason that this is occurring is because Apple actually offers an alternative to Spotify that is exempt from the rules that Spotify has to play by. So Apple doesn't have to pay itself this 30% cut, right? They get to offer Apple Music as the default app for everything. You can't change it at all. And it's like, yeah, so there's where the waters become muddied. So now you're basically you have to go to the App Store. Apple offers its own app, and Apple's own app is not, beholden to any other restrictions that Spotify's app is beholden to. So they have like here they're really flexing the monopolistic tendencies, which I absolutely agree with because they can basically make it so that buying and purchasing a Spotify app is 30% more expensive, or buying a Spotify pass is 30% more expensive than Apple's own like membership. And the reason it's 30% more expensive is because Apple doesn't have to charge itself its Apple tax. And so they have a natural competitive advantage through no fault of Spotify's. Because if you pay for your Spotify membership off site, it's the same, I'm pretty sure, but it's more expensive in iOS specifically because of this. And I think they're going to get slammed for antitrust for sure. What's up?
I think so as well. There's also the aspect of this where they've tried to make the entire ecosystem surrounding all of this to play super, super nicely and to not work with Spotify as much as possible. Like it even reaches like little corners of the internet and how your phone tech works. Like if you have an app called Shazam and you're like, what's that music? And you hit the button. They went out and actually bought Shazam, and now they own that. And so the default choice when you're like, what's this song? Play me the rest of this song, and they'll go find it. It'll instantly default it to the music choice that Apple gets to pick now. And so they went out and did this just so that every time you Shazammed a song, you'd end up at Apple Music. Even on my Android phone, I use Shazam, and it tries to default me into Apple Music.
Into Apple Music, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they had this issue with browsers too. They didn't even have the option till iOS 14. I'm pretty sure they didn't even have the option to set a default anything else. Default browser was Safari, and it was staying that way. Apparently, they're supposed to be changing it to, you're supposed to be able to change your default. You're supposed to be able to change your default, music app. I thought that would be this time too. And it actually is really annoying because if you ask, if you basically ask Siri to do anything, it will go to the default apps, right? So if you ask it to play something, it immediately opens Apple Music even though you don't own it. If you ask it to play something and you have a HomePod or whatever, it'll always launch Apple Music even if you don't even use that thing.
This is something that Gary Vee's actually been yelling about for years, about the war for voice and automatically doing the first thing that it goes for. As in, like, if you ask an Alexa to do something, if you ask Siri to do something, it's going to default to a specific, order me a pizza, it's going to choose where it orders you the pizza from. If you say, play me this music, play me this song, it's going to pick where. That war has been brewing for a while now.
Yeah. And realistically speaking, like, I think it's going to be hard for Apple to argue that they're not a monopoly here, like, especially when it comes to their own ecosystem. And I don't really see how they're going to get away with it forever, especially when the EU seems to actually be like clamping down on it. Because you have a marketplace with very clear disadvantages to the opposition. And I guess that segues into the final bit that we were going to talk about, which is or one of the final bits, is Apple versus Tile. Now, this is a brand new development. I don't know how many people really know how this whole thing is playing out. And I think it's actually just one of the most despicably Apple things that Apple has done in quite some time. I think even more so than the 30% cut, because at least with the 30% cut thing, you can get your app on the App Store and you can like make a business and like whatever. You can actually, even though it's a ludicrous amount of money, it's still, at least you can compete in some way. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're not, competing with the default app, then whatever. Now, Tile, for those of you who don't know, is like a tracking device that you can use specifically to keep track of lost items. So if I lose my wallet and I have like a little Tile card, like I can hunt down my Tile card and I can use the Bluetooth to figure out how far away it is and stuff and figure out where it is, a place of sound. It's very useful. And the way that Tile is very useful is that if your phone or if your item that you've lost is around another Tile user who has the Tile app installed, then that phone will anonymously report the location of your Tile thing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Genius.
And so people sign up for this on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, but that's really useful, right? So, like, let's say you have like a Tile attached to your keychain, so you don't lose it. Mm-hmm. I go over to your house, I lose my wallet at your place, I don't know where it went. My Tile will automatically contact your phone. It'll tell the Tile ecosystem, hey, this wallet is currently at Cobra Venom's house.
And the Internet of Things will relay you where your item is. Yeah,
exactly. It's perfect. It's perfect in that way. Like it's very nice. You can actually find stuff even if it's not in your house. Like even if you're not close by it. That's the benefit, right? Mm-hmm. So you lose an actual item out in the world, you have a chance of actually finding it. Right? That's great. Now, Apple created AirTags. And the way that the AirTags work is that it basically is a tile. It does everything tiles do, except instead of having only Tile users part of the Tile network, it leverages any iOS device on the planet that has Find My like iPhone or Find My installed. Mm-hmm. So basically, I think Tile was saying that there might be one Tile device in any one square and like one block in a major city, right? So, like, consider the difference between one person who may own a Tile device in a city and then the number of iPhones in a city. Like, there are probably 50 to 100 more iPhone devices or iOS enabled devices. Like, even if you're a staunch Windows user, you might have an iPhone or you might have an iPad. Even if you're literally like a laptop user, like you fuck Apple, like the odds that you own a single iOS device is high. They probably make something you like.
It's single very tablet, a pair of headphones.
It's unlikely. Like
maybe an Apple Watch. Who knows? But like
an iPad Mini. Forget right. like in the years and years and years that Apple products have existed, you've probably collected one. So that makes AirTags insanely valuable. Like if I put an AirTag on my keys, I'm gonna find my keys. Like because someone is going to walk by my keys who owns an iPhone. Like it's actually extremely likely that will happen. right? It's
If
very,
you're
very.
if you're actually trying to steal an item and you find one of those items in an airport, like you could put it in a Faraday cage or like an aluminum lined box is like kind of the only way to like actually circumvent most of this.
They have a way around that though. So what happens is that you won't know that there's an AirTag on the device you've stolen until you're almost home. Like your phone will not tell you you're close to an AirTag unless you're close to home. So you can steal my shit, but I'm gonna know that you have that, like wherever it is, like you have it, because it was moving in a direction and then it disappeared. Like, and then it just stopped. Like, so it's actually a very good thief deterrent. Like they did it in quite a clever way. So where is the problem here? Because like very clearly you can see, Apple has come in and they've undercut Tile, but it's not completely obvious because as long as Tile can, be active on an iPhone, what's the difference? Well, the difference is that Apple said you can either join the Find My network or you can fuck off and stick with your shitty little Tile network. So what that means is that they can either become a fully iOS only product and just forget all the Android devices that are in your ecosystem, and then you're competing directly with Apple's own AirTags. Like, so you would join the Find My network, right? And then everything else, fuck it. Like forget all the Android people. But now you're actively going into an ecosystem where iOS already has a massive, like the AirTag has a massive advantage already. So you'd be going in to compete against a product that Apple literally sells to do exactly the same thing and completely cutting off your entire pre-existing audience. So they basically killed Tile. Like, they just murdered them.
In essence, yeah. Straight up dark alleyway.
Yeah, because no one who owns an iPhone will ever buy a Tile product again. Because why would you?
There's no point.
It's worse.
It already isn't,
right.
And the better features already rolled up into the product you already bought. Like,
yeah. And in Apple's defense, it's obviously a terrible strategy to allow Tile to use your network if you can avoid it. Because if Tile can be found by any Android phone with a Tile and iOS, then it's just better, right? It's just actively better because there's more phones on the network on the networks combined that they could actually use. And this is like the same shit that Amazon does with Amazon Basics. Amazon sees that X product is selling extremely well. Amazon saunters over to the manufacturer and says, "Hey, we'll pay you a little bit more if you stop selling it to those guys, and we'll buy that shit.
Sell
from
it directly
you
to us."
Yeah. And they label it Amazon Basics, and they sell it,
Out
and
the
they
door.
destroy everything in the product category by doing that. Through zero innovation of their own, they basically just thief somebody else's product. It's the same shit here. Like, they basically were like, "Hey, Tiles are doing pretty good. We should make one."
So the lesson here is if you're in the tech world, don't get too big because something else is just going to come and swallow you, and you're not going to have any say in it. Congratulations.
Yeah,
welcome.
yeah. It's like it's a very telling sign that like it's a very problematic thing that companies have to be so uncomfortable selling anything that works with an Apple product, right? Because if it works with an Apple product, then it can be made by Apple and killed. They can Apple it up and fucking and murder you. So yeah, I guess we have time. Like what? We have 10 more minutes worth of shit.
We had about 10 more minutes.
So what do you think about that shit before I let's barrel on forward?
So the disturbing part here is that in order to actually fix a lot of this stuff, what ends up happening is that we're going to have to get to where the United States government and Congress actually makes laws and policies that address these things to make things better for the end consumer and make sure these companies don't get too big for their britches and destroy entire ecosystems just because they're capable of doing so, right? This is where a safe amount of government regulation comes in,
right.
And it's kind of concerning for somebody like me to think about how, especially with watching some of the stuff that's going on with people trying to explain what the fuck an app store is and an item and why Apple can't why Apple should be able to charge a certain amount, 30% or not, for a dance in a game is being decided by people who
have no knowledge of how it actually works.
May never have owned a computer in their entire lives. Like,
yeah.
I don't want to be too harsh, but damn, like,
yeah.
And the only way to kind of fix some of this is to like raise public awareness and be like, here's actually the problem. Here's how we're going to try to fix it. How do we tackle some of these things? Well, it's going to be through policy of government, and we actually need to educate people on the bigger system. So I might have shot way past your actual scope of your.
No,
what do you think
that's actually
about
a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. It's I think a lot of people don't understand that Apple and Google and basically OS developers, they actually have it's a marketplace. So like people always talk about like the free market, like when you can sell things on a fucking, out to whoever through like some sort of storefront. They are the storefront. So essentially, where there's supposed to be fair competition, there isn't fair competition, and that's kind of supposed to be a necessary element to any free market, is that the competition is fair. And now what you have is the marketplace owners are basically competing directly against products and providing themselves unfair advantages that it is impossible for any company ever to compete with, right? Because it's direct, like just if you were to try and compete with Apple, let's say, let's take Spotify, for example. If Spotify were to charge the same amount on iOS as they charge anywhere else, they'd be operating probably at a loss.
By the way, Spotify's constantly at since like their inception, they've been underwater trying to get their head above water, make a profit this whole entire time.
Right.
And they're fucking massive. So that tells you there's actually a real problem going on with like how artists get paid and how the free market of music works and record labels and all that.
Because if they're operating at a loss and Spotify itself isn't profitable, and like now artists aren't getting paid, like if artists are getting paid even like, they're getting paid poorly and Spotify's operating at a loss, like clearly they're paying them what they can, or at least that's the idea, is that they are in fact paying, what they should be. It's very interesting shit. So I guess the final thing to look at here is Apple and right to repair, which kind of ties in sort of, except it's the hardware topic of what is like, it's the hardware side of the coin. So like your software and everything you own, there's a marketplace for all of the software that you put on your phone, whether it be Android or like any like Android phone or iPhone, whatever. The flip side is the hardware, and Apple has been embroiled in this for a long time, and Louis Rossman's the guy to go to if you want to understand this issue on a more fundamental level. And if you think I get tilted, dude, Louis Rossman is a whole different level of tilt, but like in a very productive way. He is a electronics repair guy, and basically he's been trying to document all the stupid fucking ways that these corps try to explain to people that it's unsafe for third-party repair shops to repair your shit, because they're the only ones that can actually do it safely and securely, which is obviously shit. You don't have the Apple to replace a goddamn screen, okay? Some nonsensical bullshit. And the major fight going on right now is trying to get states to recognize that when you purchase a phone, you actually own it. Like it's your phone. Because the way that Apple treats it, it's not. It's really a rental. It's like it's their phone. They're the only ones that can fix it. They're the only ones that can actually decide what software you can put on it. And then and they're basically the sole proprietor of everything, and that you yourself can't do these things to it, even if you wanted to, and they'll actively fight against your ability to do any of these things yourself.
Right. There's a whole other conversation to be made here on like planned obsolescence and people actually owning the hardware and possibly having a system or designing a technical ecosystem where there's a obsolescence built into devices where it might be better in the long run to look at this from a macro perspective and think about maybe actually just having the device end up being returned to the manufacturer and you not actually own it. Okay, well that's if you want to like sell somebody a phone and then not actually let them own the phone and force obsolescence into the device, do you just want to go all the way, or do you actually want to have it right to repair and actually let repair shops? So pick your side of the fence and then like let us go that direction, because like if you're splitting it, it makes this terrible ecosystem we have now.
They're charging they're charging a premium and saying that you bought it, when in reality, that's not what you're getting.
Right.
That's not what you're getting.
There's a YouTube video out right now that's on light bulbs, and it's talks about how like there's a whole cartel that makes light bulbs so that up until LEDs, they made light bulbs too good, and people weren't buying any more light bulbs because they were lasting too long, and so that then they started slowly making them last shorter and shorter until everybody
they crimped the filament, right?
Yeah, so like that's a whole thing that people can go look up, and it's kind of interesting, leads us down this path. But that's about all I got time for this week.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to talk about and dive in there.
Yeah. Apple got hit with the planned very quickly. Apple got hit with the planned obsolescence shit.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Like it's been a hot minute.
2-3 years ago?
Yeah. How did that come about again?
Okay. Very quickly. So what happened was seconds. Apple was slowing down their phones.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yes. Okay.
And there was a massive fucking
slowing
pushback.
The CPU to like let the batteries last
to let
longer
the batteries be as long as they used to be, because people were complaining, about how short the battery life had become. So they were like, all right. We were
talking about this earlier this week, actually.
Yeah. And then there was a huge scandal. They got fined a lot of money for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I'll let you go, and then we'll meet next Tuesday.
Sounds good. Cobra actually linked this in chat. If anybody's interested, I should watch that. It's pretty good video, for sure.
All right.
I think
so. What are we at? We're at. Is this 2 episodes or 3?
This is our third episode already. It's crazy.
All right. How many do we need for Spotify? 3?
I think it's 3. So like nice. Later this week, I'm gonna actually grab all these and start packaging them up and sign up for all the accounts, and then start publishing them everywhere. So look for us on Spotify and iTunes soon.
Sick. All right, sick.
See you next week.
All right, take care, buddy. Good luck.
Thank you. You too.